Hello everyone, and thank you guys all so much for coming in today. I wanted to discuss the science of reading today with the effective reading writing strategies so that way we are all a little bit better equipped to do this in our classrooms. So the reason why I want to go over literacy and the science of reading is because literacy is super important for a child and has been linked to children's futures and their success in the future as well. So, if a child can't read and write properly, they're going to struggle in school and life in the future. So, it is super important that we as educators teach using the science of reading. All right, so let's go ahead and go to the next slide. The science of reading is a large scientific research-based been conducted over the last 5 years. This research base deals with reading and other issues related to reading and writing. It also involves the issues that some students have when they are trying to learn to read. So using this method is really important because it is based on science of what is proven to work for children and what is proven not to work for children, and how that they really learn to read. So like I said, reading leads to children becoming successful in the future, and so using this proven method is going to help children become successful, and it will allow us to be successful with our kids. Alright, and this is going to bring us to our next slide. Okay, so the next slide's going to be over, the next few slides are going to be over the 5 reading instruction elements. So those 5 reading instruction elements that need to be taught in our classrooms are phonics awareness, alphabetics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. The first of these elements that we're going to discuss is phonics awareness. This element looks at whether a child has the ability to detect, manipulate, analyze the different aspects of spoken language. So this is going to be taught to children through either modeling awareness, which would be when the children see their peers and teachers participating in these phonics awareness activities. I know for myself, if I watch somebody do something, it's much easier for myself to go about and do it, and they're going to understand what phonics awareness even is. Another option to teach this element is going to be to focus on one phoneme or sound at a time. If you focus on one in a lesson, then the children are able to get a better grasp for the sound, and they're not overloaded with all this information and not retaining anything that you're teaching them in the lesson. Another important thing to remember when teaching is that phonics awareness is not related to print in any sort of way. The students need to be reading aloud or listening to the text to fully understand speech sounds. They can't just be silent reading. It's not going to help with phonics awareness because it is more focusing on speech sounds. All right. The next element is going to be alphabetics. This is the ability to name printed letters and have knowledge of the sounds that are associated with those letters that they're naming. So one teaching method for this element would be to be searching for the letters. One way I like to do this is with an I Spy game with your kids. I would say something like, I spy the letter B, and the students would use the handouts and materials and that I had given them, and they would try to find that letter and point it out to me. Another strategy for practicing alphabetics would be to be writing the letters repetitively. This could also be incorporated into a game as well, where you would ask them to write the letters that you ask of them and see if they can do it correctly. Another method that is commonly used is using a chart with randomized letters to find the recognition of letters. You'd be pointing to a specific letter, having the child name it, and then also giving the sound of that letter. One thing that we have to be very careful about with is making sure that we're not going in alphabetical order. This is because a lot of kids at this stage have memorized the alphabet song all the way through, and they're not accurately recognizing the letters if you go in order, rather than they're just repeating from memorization the song, the alphabet. And a lot of times you will see children singing the alphabet song in their head to figure out what the answer is. Then I also wanted to point out that students, they tend to respond much slower whenever you're not going in alphabetical order. So this means that they're thinking, they're trying to figure out what the recognition of the letter is, and that can tell you a lot for your students. All right, the next element is going to be fluency. Fluency can be identified when children can read the words the way that they are written in the text and reading it very quickly. One strategy that you can use to teach this element is modeling. Again, showing students how we read with expression without pauses is going to show them the meaning of fluency. Sometimes we really do need to be disfluent whenever we're reading, so that way they kind of see a non-example of why fluency is super important. So if you're reading all broken up, they're going to understand why they shouldn't be doing that and what they should be doing. This way, they're also going to know kind of what is expected of them when they are reading, because if you're reading fluent all the time, they're going to think that that's normal, whereas if you are being disfluent sometimes, they're going to say, oh, I don't really like that, I'm not understanding because it's all broken up. So this is going to allow them to do that. Another strategy that we use is repeated reading practice. So our students need to continue to have repeated reading practice to develop fluency. The more they practice, the more the student is going to develop their skills. One way to do this is by putting a pair of students together to paired read together. Working with their peers is going to allow them to be open and constructive, and they're going to be open to criticism, and it's going to teach them to be more fluent readers for comprehension, and they're more likely to listen to what their peers have to say versus themselves or us as teachers. Students should also be reading many different types of text, such as informational, expository, nonfiction, poetry, and so much more. This will give them a bigger base of knowledge and learn how to express and read fluently with all different types of text, because if they're just reading one type of text, they're going to become set in a way, and they may become fluent in that text, but then when they go to read a different type of text in the future, because they have to, they're not going to be fluent in that type of text because they don't know how to read it. One last strategy that we as teachers can use in the classroom to teach fluency is by monitoring our students and holding them accountable for their reading. We need to make sure that we're checking in and listening to what and how they're reading, checking for fluency errors, and correcting them so that way they understand what they did wrong and how they can fix it, so that way they don't continue to make the mistake over and over and over. All right. And then my next element is going to be vocabulary. The vocabulary element looks at how well children are able to recognize words and how well they comprehend or understand the words that they're reading. As they age through elementary, they need to be expanding their vocabulary vastly. So this is a large topic that needs to be covered in our classrooms. One way to cover and teach this is going to be by using context. We need to be explaining to them what context means and what context is and what determines what the other words are. This can help those that are struggling with large new words and that they're unfamiliar with. If you're telling the students that context is giving meaning to the word that they don't know, then they're going to understand a little bit more how to figure out that word, and they're going to be given strategies to figure it out on their own without having to ask for help. Another way to teach this element is going to be to give students repeated exposure to new words. So that way they're going to become familiar with them and begin to comprehend its meaning. To do this, we could use like a word map for a week and every day bring up the word map and discuss it. Give some examples, some non-examples, a definition. This can be done in many, many ways, but it is really super important to acquire memorization. We also need to be teaching directly and incidentally. We can do this by showing the students both examples and non-examples, like I said. This could be done using the word map again. This is going to allow them to see what the word is and what the word is not. We can also link these to vocab words or link these vocab words to other words that are more familiar with. This is another instance where we could use the word map to teach our students new vocab. All right, and then the final element of reading instruction is comprehension. This is going to be defined as a strategy that helps the student understand what exactly it is that they are reading. This concept, in my opinion, is one of the hardest elements to teach, and I was even kind of confused on how I was going to go about teaching it and how I was going to explain this to my kids whenever I was first starting out. We need to be open to new ideas and concepts to teach this to get through to our students, because it is going to be challenging. One way that we can teach this concept is by using the reciprocal teaching method. In this, we need to ask the students to guess an answer and predict what they think is going to happen with the answer. So we also need to be making sure that they know that there is no judgment, there's no bad guesses, there's nothing like that, because this part is super important with reciprocal teaching. They need to be open to giving a guess. That is going to lead to the rest of this. Then after we get the predictions back, we should ask students questions on why they think that it's going to be the answer, how they got there, any other questions that this conversation may lead to. You never know. So then we need to clarify what they said and summarize how we got to that answer, show them how you should get to the answer and what the actual answer is, and then we're going to summarize everything that we talked about, the predictions, the clarifying, the questions. You're going to summarize everything that you guys have discussed, how you got to the answer, and things like that. We should also always be using questioning as a higher level of thinking for every single classroom. I have dug into many conversations with my students that were way above the knowledge level that I thought that they were all at, because of the higher level thinking questions and being willing to ask those hard questions. These questions may also lead to our next point, actually, engaging in interactive discussions. So talking can mean learning. It doesn't have to be flashcards or standing up there and lecturing. It doesn't have to be like that. Sometimes having a conversation with the students and having the students have a conversation with themselves can actually lead to a lot of learning in the classroom by both the teacher and the students. So be willing to engage in those interactive discussions with your class. Let them have interactive discussions among themselves. All right, and this is going to bring us to the 5-block reading and writing essentials model and how it ties in with the science of reading. Okay. So the 5-block model is composed of 5 parts: writing, fluency, comprehension, word work, and small group differentiated reading instruction and practice. So these 5 groups are going to be performed every day for 180 minutes a day in each grade, 1st through 3rd. Kindergarten students are going to perform this in 90 minutes every day with all the time slots cut into half. So if it's a 30-minute block, you're going to do it for 15 minutes, just for future reference. So this block time needs to be uninterrupted, and we can't be transitioning within periods of classes at all. So let's get into what these even mean. So the first block is going to be writing, which would be performed for 30 minutes for grades 1st through 3rd, 15 for kindergarten students. So in this block, the teacher is going to give the students many forms of writing: informative, poetry, persuasion, narrative, etc. There's so many more. And they're going to explain the word choice that they use, the organization, the fluency, the ideas, how they're talking and expressing themselves, and so much more on that as well. Just kind of why the text is made up the way that it is. Okay? So this way, the students can look through and tell what type of text an article or book is and read it appropriately and be able to name the type of text that it is. So you're going to give your students a certain type of reading text, and then they are going to learn everything about that. So if it's poetry, you're going to teach them why it's written that way and why everything seems to rhyme and things like that. So they're able to identify it whenever they're in the real world and reading an article and then they know. So the next block is going to be that of fluency.